Good afternoon and welcome back to another ironic introduction to another video. Today I'm going to be going over the Book 2, Act 1, Chapter 1, Brave New Battle Realm forum announcement from Kabam. As always, there's a link to the forum in the description below if you'd like to read it for yourself, and timestamps if you want to jump to my thoughts on the rewards or the breakdown of the new nodes, etc., because this might be a lengthy video. As far as the post itself goes, we have some neat little stories, some clever lore. If you're into that, it is actually really neat, so check that out if that's something you like. They talk about what their incentives or guiding principles were in reshaping Book 2. So they want to empower players with meaningful choices, respect players' investment of time, money, and champion choice, reward player achievements, and punish fewer losses. And they want to reduce the player's mental load and let them spend more time enjoying the quest. And that is going to completely affect the way they have the basics. So these are the fundamentals for what you can expect in Book 2. So it's going to be one act composed of 4 chapters. Each chapter will consist of 6 quests, and then each quest will be composed of 6 paths with 6 encounters per path. So essentially 198 fights per chapter, or 36 paths per chapter, which is pretty cool. And then in each quest there will be 3 final bosses, and 2 of the paths will converge on each final boss, and then 1 choice node per path located at the end of the path just before the final boss. So we're not going to be fighting the same boss 6 times. Essentially it's going to be 18 bosses that will fight 2 times each. So Book 2 is going to be a lot more boss fights and a lot less how do I clear the path to get to the boss fight in the first place. Which is really solid as well. That choice node is going to allow players to swap out any single non-KO champion for a 5 or 6 star in their roster. So that does imply the 5 and 6 star gate is going to stand. Additionally, they have the multiple boss fights they talk about here, where they this allows the designers to craft interesting boss fights that can afford to be more niche, knowing they won't brick wall players attempting their completion runs. So even though we have more bosses, you should expect more niche bosses as a result. But I think this is fine. If you put in 3 different final bosses and then each one is irrespectively niche to a different set of champions, it hits like 3 times as many champions, right, just off base. And that becomes a lot more reasonable than just like one boss that stands as a wall that players have to overcome. So depending on how they do that and how niche they get, sounds pretty good for me. As far as an energy breakdown, the average energy per quest will be 69 energy for completion, so essentially 69 energy for 1 path, and 414 energy per mastery. I'm just going to do a quick check here, which is 69 energy on average there. So they do match that up properly. And the total energy cost for completion will be 414 energy and 2,484 energy for exploration. Not too bad. And then as they are wanting to do this, they want to introduce a new class of buffs. So these new buffs are going to be class specific, and essentially their intention here is to provide rewarding buffs or benefits to you for bringing in the right class. Rather than targeting specific champions, they're going class by class. It does seem like Kabam is really going back to their roots recently on like sticking to class and emphasizing class benefits, and really working around that. This way, champions that aren't as impactful maybe can stand in the limelight just because they are good enough when compared just to their class rather than to the roster of MCOC champions in its entirety. So from here, I'll stick a timestamp because I'm going to go through all the nodes. But the first one are the skill nodes. So the first one is Shake It Off, where skill attackers purify 1 debuff whenever they dash backwards. The number of debuffs purified increases by 1 for each subsequent dash performed in a row. This is really cool. Hopefully this will allow maybe for them to have nodes like Biohazard and Freezer Burn, where you don't have to bring a actually immune champion. It might just be a lot of like 1 hits, or hit until you get the debuff and then back off kind of a thing. So there's really good potential for that depending how they stack it. They've got Cage Rattler. Whenever a skilled attacker is blocked, they have a 50% chance to passively stun the defender for 2 seconds. Stun chance is increased for 10%. by 10% for every 5 hits on the attacker's combo meter. This is really, really cool. Could potentially give us an alternative opening, maybe for like a lot of those champions who have like Mighty Charge or something. This might give you an opening or really, really pop up, especially if you're using a champion like Masakre or something. You can double dip for a lot of really good potential. Whenever a skill attacker fails to apply a debuff to the defender due to an immunity, they gain a precision buff, increasing critical rating by 40%. I will say that this one's probably the worst. This is very similar to what Ronin does already, Ronin, with his failing to apply bleeds. And it's okay. I think he actually gets a cruelty buff, and he crits pretty frequently, so it's not even an issue. It's just that like it's not that big of a deal. Out of the 3, I think this is the one I'm the least interested in. Yes, it's extra damage, but a lot of skill attackers already crit very, very high, so having increased critical rating doesn't impress me. This would be cool if it was a precision buff and a cruelty buff, so it also had like a damage, just like flat damage increase as well, but that's okay. Maybe they'll relook at that one in the future. For Mystic, we have Muscle Wizard. Whenever a Mystic attacker knocks down the defender, the attacker gains an Unstoppable buff for 6 seconds. If the attacker was already unstoppable, they gain an Indefinite Fury buff, increasing attack rating by 50%. A maximum of 4 buffs can be gained this way. So this one is really, really cool, especially when you think about the fact that, like, depending on how you scale it with Mystics, and if you push them to the corner, or like you're using a Mystic, say like Doom or Claire or Magic, who can very, very easily put the opponent in the corner and then just spam heavies into them. This is a really, really, really awesome one. And then given that like Mystic has one of the lowest damage outputs in the game, don't get me wrong, there are some exceptions, but for the most part they have the lowest damage output in the game. I really, really like this node. For Mystic Focus, whenever a Mystic attacker holds block or charges a heavy attack, they activate a power gain buff, providing 5% of their max power every 1 second for the duration of the block or heavy charge. This one is cool as well, especially given how special-centric Mystics are. And then Mystic Curse. Whenever a Mystic attacker activates a special attack, they poison the defender, dealing 60% of their attack rating as direct damage over 7 seconds. The potency of the poison increases by 25% for every buff on the defender. This one is interesting and definitely more targeted towards the non-most common, most popular Mystics, but still has really good potential, so I'll be keeping my eye out for that one. Next up are the Cosmic nodes. Impatience. Whenever a Cosmic attacker fails to trigger a buff due to chance, they have a 100% chance to trigger a Fury buff instead, increasing attack by 80% for 7 seconds. This cannot trigger itself. This one seems absurd. They first champion that comes to mind is Hyperion. Like, I see this and I'm just like, whoa, Hyperion might look pretty nutty with Impatience. So that's really cool. Next up is Cosmic Fracture. Cosmic attackers' light attacks have a 50% chance to armor break the defender, reducing their armor rating by 40% for 7 seconds. If the light hit was critical, the chance is 100% instead. This one's cool as well. I think there's a lot of really good potential for scaling that armor break. My only thing is I'm not too familiar with how the new resistance, armor break, negative armor works now. I do believe because of the change, this is slightly worse now than it would have been if they had implemented this kind of a node previously. That's my understanding of it. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but this is still really cool, a really clever way to give extra damage, and an awesome way to give Cosmic Champions access to armor break where maybe they didn't have access to armor break previously. Next up is Cosmic Avalanche. Whenever Cosmic attackers activate a special attack, they gain a plus 40% Fury buff for the duration of that special attack for each unique buff on them. Immediately think Angela. Definitely have a lot of potential there. Lots of Cosmic Champions who can take very good advantage of that, but Angela is the first one I think of. Next up is Mutant Mastery. Whenever a mutant attacker applies a debuff to the defender, they have a 40% chance to gain an indefinite prowess buff, increasing special attack damage by 30%. This chance increases by 20% for each debuff on the defender. These prowess buffs are removed after the attacker finishes a special. This is pretty standard. Definitely a few mutants who can take a good advantage of this. I feel like this one's a little more targeted on the mutant scale, but still pretty good. 40% chance does mean parry, will trigger this a lot of the time, but I do think there are like specific mutants I have in mind for triggering that. Acclamation, every 5 hits on their combo meter, mutant attackers purify all bleed, incinerate, and cold snap debuffs currently on them. Any debuff purified this way will provide the attacker with 10% of a bar of power. I actually really like this one, not in the sense of like when you're using Omega Red, because that could be very frustrating, but I do really like it in the sense of like you want to run attrition masteries, and now you can bring pretty much any poison immune champion in, but honestly the poison's like the least of your worries. It's the bleed every fight, so if you start the fight off with like a parry 5-hit combo, you purify that bleed right away, comes out to like 2% of your health, really low negative there. So this would be really good for long run. I like seeing that kind of a node, minus the hit it gives to Omega Red, of course. But even Omega Red, just parry spam until your bleed is almost up, locking your spores with your heavy. So there are ways to work around that. And then Evolutionary Advantage. While the defender is suffering from a bleed, armor break, or concussion debuff, mutant attackers gain an indefinite Fury buff, increasing attack rating by 70%. The Fury is removed when the defender no longer has any of these debuffs. Again, this one is a little more targeted as well, but there's still really good potentials for it, so we'll see. It also depends on how they scale it up with other nodes, because a lot of other nodes can do bleeding, armor breaks, and concussion effects, so we'll have to see. I think this one personally would be better if it was like in skill, but small things. Power Suppression. Whenever a science attacker activates a special attack, they apply an Enervate debuff to the defender for 6 seconds, preventing them from gaining power when struck. Whenever this Enervate would expire, it consumes an active debuff on the defender to reapply itself. This one seems absurd. I can think of like Spider-Gwen. Honestly, any science champion with a stun like Luke Cage could potentially just brutalize the opponent in the corner. So a lot of really cool potential for that. Next is a Backfire. Whenever a science attacker performs a well-timed block, they apply a Power Sting debuff to the defender for 5 seconds. Defenders with Power Sting take 100% of the attacker's attack rating as direct damage when activating a special attack. The duration increases by 25% for each debuff on the defender. This one's neat. I think this is a cool way if they plan on implementing a lot more of the Power Sting nodes, which I'm guessing they will. So this is a clever way of saying, hey, you can bring any science champion here. So that really adds a lot of value there. Eat Crow. Science attackers gain immunity to Nullify. Whenever a Nullify or Poison fails to apply to the attacker due to immunity, they gain a Fury passive, increasing attack by 80% for 6 seconds. This makes me think maybe we'll have some more Sim Supremes. I'll have to wait and see how that one goes. Whenever a Nullify or Poison fails is an interesting part, because there's not like a ton of science poison immunes. There are a good handful, but not a ton. So I am interested in how they utilize that node at least. And then finally for tech is Technical Suppression. Whenever a tech attacker activates a special attack, they have a 100% chance to heal block the defender for 8 seconds. If the defender was already heal blocked, the attacker instead gains a Fury buff for the duration of that special attack, increasing attack rating. This is awesome. There are a ton of underrated tech champions who heal block, where their like biggest issue is lack of damage. And so being able to do this to the opponent and then gain a Fury buff as a result has a lot of really good potential. My biggest question is whether or not this will apply to Mysterio, because Mysterio is a passive heal block. This does not say heal block debuff, so I would hope it applies to him as well, and he would have access to this like permanently. So I do hope that will work on him. Next up is Fortification. While tech attackers have an armor up buff, they are immune to bleed, poison, and cold snap effects. Whenever a tech attacker would receive a debuff they are immune to, they gain a Fury passive, increasing attack rating by 20% for 7 seconds. This one's pretty nice, especially since they have like the whole nano plague and the cutting wires, the nodes that make it so you don't bring robots, and a lot of robots are tech. Most robots are tech. And so when you wanted to bring like a tech champion in and then you had to deal with nano plague, you couldn't bring them in and still respond to bleed and poison simultaneously. So I do like this. It really opens up that roster. I do think this one might end up coming to bite us more than anything, but hopefully it's used in such a way where it's just beneficial, and really opens up that roster, especially coupled with the one above. I can think of like Civil Warrior potentially being solid with like immunities and that armor up. for tankiness and that heal block and getting extra damage from the Fury. So a lot of really good potential there. The gloves are off whenever a tech attacker removes their own armor up buff, or it expires, or it is removed by an armor break. They have a 30% chance to gain a Fury buff, increasing attack rating by 50% for 8 seconds. This chance increases by 15% for every attacker armor up buff that has expired or been removed by an armor break since the start of the fight. This one is interesting. A 50% boost for 8 seconds is no small feat. Again, my mind goes to Civil Warrior here, but there are quite a few champions. I will comment here that it says specifically armor up buff, so I don't think Iron Man Infinity War will work here. I would have liked to see this say just armor up, because it would have been nice if Iron Man Infinity War would have gained access to both of these. The fortification and the gloves are off, because I do feel like his biggest weakness is damage output. He's just kind of slow. He's tanky, satisfying, but slow. And this would have been really, really good for him in that regard. And then finally, now that we've talked about the nodes, is the 6-star service. So there are 3 globals that are being added, and we can expect to see them through chapters 1, 2, 3, and 4. The first is Adrenaline Rush. The attacker gains up to 100% damage reduction at all times, scaling with their current adrenaline. Adrenaline is gained after being struck. So essentially, this is saying adrenaline counts for twice as much, which is really cool, or you always get the healing factor of adrenaline. So that's solid. Hold the line. The attacker gains up to plus 80% block proficiency at all times, scaling with their current adrenaline. Adrenaline is gained after being struck. That's solid. I think it will help, but I don't know how much that will help with the chip damage since it's scaling. I would like to see the curve. Like if this is just linear, that's not super helpful, but if it's like exponential, it could be very, very useful. And then finally, 6-star attackers gain a permanent passive Fury, increasing attack rating by 700. 700 is a pretty healthy dose of power, so that's actually really, really good as well. 6 stars just flat out going to hit harder, so that's always nice as well. Then they have a ton of new boss nodes, which I'm not going to go over. I apologize. And then everything old is new again. Book 2.11 sees the return of familiar foes for some and the unveiling of bold new enemies for others. Mashup Champions. These unique opponents combine the best or worst of 2 different champions into a singular potent threat, waiting to challenge any summoner bold enough to attempt Chapter 1. Do you have what it takes to depose these deranged devils? So essentially what they've done is they've taken previous champions and they've combined their abilities, so it'll be one champion with essentially a node. I hope that it's a node, but it looks like they might just be the abilities. So you're going to have to go in and just know that this is there if I'm wrong. But I do personally hope that they put like a node here for this Electro Luke Cage, which is going to be a Luke Cage with Electro's, Thorns abilities. So I hope that they have that there so people don't walk into the Luke Cage and go, hey, why am I taking this damage? But Namor's probably going to be a cheat code for that fight in particular. And then finally, the rewards. I'll stick a timestamp here for those of you interested in the rewards. So the rewards are decent. They're decent. And I have pros and cons here. As always, I'll try to stick to the pros first. So the first pro is that we're getting a 6-star rank 1 to 2 gem. So at least it's not a 4 to 5 5-star gem. 1 to 2 gem does mean you can't use the tier 5 basic and the tier 2 alpha to access like a 6-star rank 3, but it's still a solid resource and I'm pretty okay with that. We see tier 5 CC in the completion rewards, so that's pretty solid. You are getting a full 6-star for completion, so that's fun, and 10 6-star 6 stones. So 6-star 6 stones are present in the completion rewards. Additionally, just like for per path, so I'm going to go by per quest because it's just easier that way, but per quest there's going to be 100,000 gold, 90 units, 1,500 6-star shards more, so like 9,250 or something, 9,000 and some change by the time you no, 9,000. I don't know why I thought 9,000 and some change. 9,000 6-star shards, so almost a second 6-star shard, 6-star crystal by the time you've explored it. So that's something to be noted. A total of 1.5 tier 2 alpha per quest exploration and 1 tier 5 basic. So there is tier 5 basic and there is tier 2 alpha. It's just on the path, not in the completion rewards. And then for exploration, we're finally getting that tier 5 CC selector in the form of a 25%. So that's some hype for those of you who maybe maybe need that last little bit. And then 25% RNG, of course, a 6-star Nexus Crystal, 26-star Sig Stones generic, and 10 more Sig Stones RNG, and then 1 million gold again. So the good things is, one, I like the 6-star rank up gem. I like seeing 40 total 6-star Sig Stones. It's an okay amount. Not the world's greatest, but this is just chapter 1, so my expectations weren't too high. I'd say this is about what I was expecting, somewhere in the 25 to 50 range. I love seeing a selector in the exploration rewards. Even if it's 25%, it is a step in the right direction, and I'm going to be honest, you don't need all 50% to be a selector, because usually you're just like trying to top off. So I think that's solid as well. And then a total of 75% tier 5 CC between the two, completion and exploration, so that's solid. Not the world's greatest, but it's solid. This rank 1 to 2 gem does mean we're seeing essentially 3 tier 5 basics, 7 tier 2 alpha, 8 tier 4 class catalysts, and I think 6 tier 1 alpha. It's been a while, I'm pretty sure that's what it works. So it's a solid value in rank up materials, and then these per path rewards are good as well. Those are the pros. The cons, one, it's not a lot of 6-star shards. For an exploration, a player who jumps in and explores this all tomorrow, it is 3 6-star crystals for an exploration of this chapter, which is not a lot. It's not even 3. It's 2.9. I would have liked it to be closer to 4 or 5. I think I would have liked to see 1 for the completion. I'd rather have 2 6-stars than a 6-star Nexus Crystal in the case of an exploration rewards, or maybe even 25,000 6-stars. I'd rather have quantity over the quality of choice here. When I'm purchasing it with money or units, I prefer the Nexus Crystal, of course, selectivity over quantity. But in this case, it's already RNG very centric, and chance of you getting like Cyclops, Groot or something here is present. So I would have rather had quantity here just for the Sig Stones equivalency. So small thing there, and then I think 9,000 shards over the course of the paths. Like, seeing 750 shards on a path is not exciting at all. I would like to see this be 1,000 at least, maybe 2,000 more realistically. 750 just feels weak. So that's my first hit. Is the 6-star shards is a little underwhelming. But again, this is chapter 1, so I'm not too bummed out by seeing that. It's just kind of like oof, that's low. Next up is the rank up material itself. I would have rather seen 3 tier 5 basic, 7 tier 2 alpha, tier 4 class catalyst selectors, and then tier 1 alpha here. Like, I would have preferred to see the resource separated. Because there's still going to be a handful of people running completion, still looking to rank up 5 stars. And there's going to be a handful of people running completion who maybe want to bring up a rank 3 6-star instead, and they don't have access to those rank up materials here now. So I would have preferred to see this separated out. But on the flip side, we might be only getting this gem this way and the equivalent quantity of rewards because they've slapped it on an RNG crystal. That is a potential, and if that's the case, it does change my mind a little bit. Like, maybe we would have seen less rewards in, because of the selectivity there. So that is worth commenting on. And then finally is the tier 2 alpha drought, which I personally don't see yet, but I know exists. So I would be remiss to not comment on it. 1.5 tier 2 alpha to a full tier 5 basic in the pathing is rough. You need like 4 times as much tier 2 alpha. I will say though, that while I respect the tier 2 alpha drop, do remember that Thronebreaker Glory Store does have access to essentially a full tier 2 alpha for 3 purchases of the tier 2 alpha. So that's essentially 4 tier 2 alpha a month that you're getting from just the Glory Store, not to mention the existence of Cavalier, side events, and tier 2 alpha in a lot of other portions of the game. So it might be that while there is currently a tier 2 alpha drought, that might not be a problem in the future. But more likely, I think it's just natural tier 2 alpha drought created in the same way there's a tier 1 alpha drought, where they just utilize the lower resource as a way to mitigate things. So as much as people say, hey, there's a tier 2 alpha drought, does not necessarily mean Kabam's going to do anything about it anytime soon. But this does just kind of emphasize my belief that in the Glory Store, the tier 2 alpha is worth more. And the tier 5 basic, like, I personally don't even buy the tier 5 basic. I don't think it's worth the glory. But that said, overall, I would say the rewards are okay. I'm not in any kind of enticement as a result of seeing these rewards to, like, jump into book 2 immediately. So I'm still not going to. But but hopefully those of you who are like really enticed by it, you know, and of course we do finally get that selector. That's a huge win for the community. So gotta take them small steps. And then finally, I'll end on the note that I want to say book 2.1.1 is coming out really delayed. And 6 paths, 6 fights each for 6 quests is not the world's largest amount of development. And if that's the status quo for chapters 2, 3, and 4, there is a strong potential, and I would gamble that we see book 2.2, book 2.1, or book 2.1.2, or book 2, chapter 2. I would gamble that we see that sooner than people think. I really think that we see the next installment of book 2 in the next 3 to 6 months. And so these rewards might look smaller right now, but if the frequency of scale for story quest is upped, if we're seeing this content come out more frequently on a smaller bite-sized pieces, then it's not as small as it looks. And that's what I think personally. Maybe that's just me being optimistic, but that is the note I want to end on, as I think the next chapter of book 2 is coming out sooner than people would expect. As always, let me know what you think in the comments. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll talk to y'all later. Peace.